Zoom, or she'll scare the crap out of me.
It's live streamed.
Yep,
Got it.
It gave me a heads up.
Oh, you know what? I suppose, yeah. Even though it should, I'm going to hit record also, because why not?
Or she'll scare the crap out of me.
Record. Uh-oh.
Yeah, be on the safe side.
I gotta mute this.
You know what? I suppose, yeah. Even though it should, I'm gonna hit record also.
Yeah, there's your delay. I hear your delay coming in.
Record.
There we go. I was trying to find the mute. Yeah.
All right, I'm live.
I'm dead.
And we are live.
Hey, we did something. So hey, I'm Joe Lyons from the Automator.
And I am Tab Nation, aka Tom. It's always funny to introduce myself. I got in the habit of introducing myself as Tab Nation versus Tom.
Hi, Dan. It's funny as I'm trying to think this through. I'm like, we see the text. Those texts are probably now. It's not delayed, but
yeah, I don't think
by the time he hears us talk, it's still, you know, so he'll see the chat first and then hear it. But anyway, yeah. Dan, so awesome. Thanks for joining us. And so we don't feel like we're just a bunch of losers sitting here with no one listening to us. But we saw your question, you know, that you submitted, and I emailed you, which actually I didn't look at my emails, but was your script something that you can't share? Because it's hard to troubleshoot something like that. To back up a step, so anyone else who ever watches this, Dan submitted a question saying basically that every once in a while his script will just stop being responsive and he has to reload, go to the icon and reload it in order to get it to be responsive. And then Tom, why don't you mention some of you and I, before we started streaming, we're talking about this in general, right? This is something to me, I'm like, I don't want to say every time I've had this problem, it's because of a programming problem for me. It's not, you know, AutoHotkey fundamentally, you know, the programming language anyway, but I think you had a slightly different take on it.
Yeah, no, like you said, you know, most of the time it probably is going to be some type of weird error you got going on in there. But at my previous job, we had that same problem, even with like the simplest of scripts, where for like, if it ran for like 8 hours, it would suddenly just start having issues, shut down, freeze up was most commonly what happened. Now, this is just kind of theory outside of obviously there being a problem with your code. But the thing we had was it would just freeze after 8 hours. We kind of looked into it, and the best thing we could come up with is that, especially when we were using like comms, is we were having some weird like memory leak, which unfortunately we were never able to like fully figure out what was going on there. But memory leak was the best theory we could come up with, because we did notice as time went on, the CPU usage just kept going up and up in the memory usage, which was really bizarre. So something I had done that might help you, unless like Joe said, it's your code. Obviously, that's always probably the more likely. But I would do I did a set timer, and I think I had to go off maybe like every 4 hours, and all it did was a reload.
Yeah, to show you, you can write this freehand, right, in a minute. Share your screen.
Set code, or set timer. Yeah, let me do that.
Set timer, and then have it jump to it, and that's where it'll automatically, every whatever seconds you want it to jump to it, automatically run the code in it, and that's where you're just reloading it. Now, you and I, again, before we got into this, was I was saying, hey, there's probably something going on in his specific program. However, without having the actual program, your solution is it's the way to go, right? It's a Band-Aid, quote unquote. It's not going to fix it, but it gets around it by just reloading your script every so often.
Yeah, so I don't know how many milliseconds that translates to. I'm just putting
a lot
in there.
Yeah.
So
I'd say reload it once a minute, right? I mean,
yeah. For us, it was like every 4 hours seemed to do it. And literally, this was all the code. This was all it did. Set timer, jump to reload, obviously name it whatever you want, and then how often you want. That really depends how often you think the problem's coming up. And it just does a reload. And that's it. Now, if you have like variables that you want to save, there's really two options. You could have them go into the clipboard temporarily and then have your script read the clipboard when it starts, or even better yet, just using like an INI file. But if you don't have any like important like variables that you need to save when it reloads, this will do the job. Just simple reload with a timer. So yeah, that was pretty much my solution then. But obviously,
Right.
like you said, really just rubber duck coding. You know, go through your code and really make sure there's not some weird thing going on.
So here's one thing they could possibly do. Instead of reloading the script, right, double click on the icon and then go to, you know, the past, you know, what was run past, right, the last couple lines, and maybe that'll help you pinpoint what's breaking.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Because it is a weird problem that, you know, like Joe was saying, he's never really had that issue, but I've seen it a ton.
Oh,
and even at our job, it was very weird. Like some people would have the issue all the time, and then some people on their computers never had the issue. So I don't know if it's like a hardware thing or, you know, laptop versus desktop, or, you know, it's just something that's so hard to really truly find. So like, you know, this is a Band-Aid, like Joe said.
I want to clarify. I didn't mean I had never had the issue. I'm saying every time I had the issue, it was because of a fault in my design and my programming, right? It wasn't something that was like, holy cow, I have uncovered a bug in AutoHotkey.
Yeah, no, 99% of the time, it's going to probably be your code somewhere doing something funky.
And I noticed here are a couple people, Jean Alon, the author of Quick Access Popup, and Ryan Wells are here. They're both often in the webinars, and John's actually leading our next webinar on AutoHotkey. John's way over there. Hi. And the next webinar, I'll look up the date, but I'll put a link in. Actually, I have that, of course, for a hot string here. So link, you can register for the next webinar here. It's going to be on objects, and John's going to walk us through kind of baby stepping into how to use objects. You know, objects in AutoHotkey are amazing structures and to be able to save data, do stuff, and 8 million other things. So I'm looking forward to that webinar.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. We've talked before. I've never messed a lot with objects. I don't know why. I know you're all about them. So it'll be nice to kind of get you guys' take on it and, you know, try to get myself into it a little better. Especially like version 2 objects are kind of nice.
Yeah. So, and to clarify, because I use objects, I use them for storing and accessing data a lot. What I don't do, what I should do, is use them more for like using the pop and, you know, this and that of ways to, you know, really programmatically do. Well, that's not the right way to say that. But and then the other one, so the next webinar is going to be on objects, and then Jackie and I are going to lead one on using functions and creating your own functions and leveraging functions. And then if I remember right, I think John agreed to also, because my initial request to him was I'd like to learn classes, using classes. And I've played with them and I can use one sort of, but writing them from scratch, which I did a couple examples, but I don't program in them. And I know for very specific things, they are incredibly helpful, especially GUI stuff, but I don't normally work in them. So I asked him to lead a webinar on that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Check those out for sure.
So Dan, sorry, I can look at my email, but did you share your script, or you think that solution is going to work for you?
Yeah, I mean, if he shares it, we can definitely at least take a glance at it, see, you know, is it the code, or, you know, is this pretty much all he got for now as a temporary fix, at least?
Yeah, right.
At least that's what it is. Temporary fix.
Thanks, Sean. The 21st is the webinar. It's always the third Tuesday of the month.
Okay.
And speaking of which,
okay.
The link that you're registering for, you know, it has upcoming webinars after that, but we make it every 2 years. And so now we're almost at the end of the second time. So this will be into 4 years of having webinars where I need to create a whole new meeting invite and then project out for another 2 years. So we'll be changing that here coming up in a bit. Sorry, Dan.
Did you get something from him?
Well, he's posting here. He's not that same Dan. Sorry, I I just saw the name Dan, and ironic for a person named Joe to be making that assumption, right? So Dan, it says you do have issues, and I assume we're not mental ones. What do you have an example? I think that the format is oh yeah, that format command. Tom, have you played with that format command in AutoHotkey?
With like time and dates, I have.
It's so complicated. I made a video on it, and try not to laugh, Tom. I'm curious if you do this as well. I made a video on it because I couldn't remember. I had used it once and I went back and I had to relearn it because it was so complicated. I said, screw it. I'm going to make a video documenting it because it's so complicated. And so I made a video walking through with a lot of examples, but man, it's a crazy complicated function, quite complex function, I might add, but it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've used it for like the date in like Outlook and stuff. That one's pretty simple. You're just grabbing like the system time and formatting it in whatever way you want. And then I was just doing like a Control V kind of thing to it, which actually, that was something we were talking about now that I just mentioned the Control V. Just to kind of throw it out there, a lot of people complain a lot about how when they use like a send command, it's really slow at typing. And, we were saying, hey, if it's more than like a few words or a sentence, you're doing like a whole paragraph or something, just throw that variable into the clipboard, clipboard equals, your variable, and just do Control V. And that's going to send so much faster. Basically, it's instantly, no matter how long it is. So just throwing that out there since I brought the thing up.
Because someone, and maybe it's the person here, or no, but because if I remember correctly, they asked a question and they said something specifically about inside Chrome, it's very slow. But part of the question, I'll go back and read it, was how do you do it without affecting the clipboard or out using your clipboard? And I would say it's like, well, why don't you just back up your clipboard, do what you want, like Tom's suggesting, and then restore your clipboard, right?
That comes up a lot, actually. A lot of people, they don't want to, they want to use the clipboard without losing the clipboard. That's I've done that before, where I've had the clipboard be stored as a variable, put another variable into the clipboard, and then once whatever actions I'm performing are done, go ahead and put the original variable back into the clipboard. So it's just, a few lines of variable switching back and forth. Yeah, but I've had that question come up a few times, actually, is how not to lose your clipboard, but still use your clipboard. It would be kind of nice if the system had multiple versions of the variable automatically.
Sure. Yeah. And the one thing I got to say, because I spent 2 or 3 hours trying to figure this out. I thought I had discovered a bug in AutoHotkey. When you do that process where you send a paste and you restore your clipboard, make sure you put a sleep in before you restore your clipboard, because what'll happen is you'll say, hey, send paste. And AutoHotkey's like, okay, I'll send paste. And then it restores the clipboard. And then you send paste and you send your original. And it took me quite a while to understand what was going on. But you add a little sleep, like not even a half a second, right? And it fixes everything.
That's what I was going to ask, is like, what do you recommend not going below as far as the sleep? Like I pretty much never go below 200 milliseconds. It's kind of,
I think you could do 50, but I'd be fine with 2. I mean, who's going to do something in 0.2 of a second anyway, right? So I was laughing because Dan's like, no, the format of using YouTube and live streaming, not the format command. So I'm like, yeah, okay. It reminds me, very off topic, but 100 years ago when I was younger and I would be out dancing, and I was dancing for hours, right? And I'm sweating buckets, and I'm dancing with this girl, and we go walk off the song dance. We walk off the dance. She's like, man, you look hot. I'm like, thank you. And she goes, no, you look hot. Tyler, not having any formatting on the text inside of Gmail. Oh, okay. So Tyler, you can actually store, and I have a post on that. I can dig it up here. You can shove RTF stuff into your clipboard. So you could save what you want in the bold, bolding certain words and this, save that in a file somewhere, and then shove that into your clipboard and paste it. So that's how I would take care of what you're commenting on and using Gmail.
Gmail has built-in formatting stuff with dates and times. Not sure though. I feel like I've seen that before. I could
A
be
flow
wrong.
chart of sleep and visual C the Y. Dan, were you asking about what I was describing with the having the sleep in there? Is that what that comment was regarding? And we'll wait 20 seconds to see your answer because you won't see this until I think, let me look at this this one I had on my screen here. I think I did that in a menu. Where's you could Tyler, I'll find the example of storing your data. And it starts with an L. There's an AutoHotkey tool, Lentilist. Is that what it is? It's written in AutoHotkey. It's a crazy complex, really amazing program. It's a little, to me, too advanced because it takes a little while to get used to, but it has it built-in formatting where you can go in and put the content in RTF format, when you paste it in the tool. And then when you do your hotkey or hot string, or actually it even pulls up a list of stuff that you can just type and then select it. It will paste it as RTF, rich text format, which will have your bold and italics or underline or whatever, right?
I've heard of it. I've never used it. I feel like I've seen it on GitHub randomly one time. I was like looking for random stuff.
It's one of those tools. It's so amazing, but it's so complicated that it's, I'm a big believer in creating tools that are just really dirt simple and not trying to add too much functionality because it scares people away, right? And that's one of those tools where it's so amazing. Yet they have like 2 windows, and like you can have one hotkey where you type stuff and then you do like a slightly altered different, and it has either this snippet you can send or this one. And I'm like, why would you have 2 different snippets that you can send based off the original? I mean, it made no sense to me. But someone, it's one of those, someone probably said, hey, could you do this for me? And they did.
If it works, it works, I guess. What else did we put on there? So we answered what you said. That wasn't the right Dan.
Correct.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
I'm looking for the Lentilist just so I can give you the link. I think I have a video actually on it, or I hope so. Yeah, it's an amazing tool.
One of these other ones we had submitted.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead and pick one while I.
Yeah, I just got to refresh my mind here on what they said.
Well,
some of these are really well written. They're pretty long. Let's talk about. Okay, let's go with that. The fancy zone question. So I forget the user. Does it say the user on here? Ben, if Ben is here, or watching later. So he kind of asked, like, I guess he was on a Linux computer and it has some sort of built-in kind of fancy zones. If you've ever used, it's PowerToys, right? Or Power Tools. I always forget which one.
I think it's PowerToys. Yeah.
PowerToys. Okay. Yeah, it is PowerToys. PowerToys has this cool thing where it can snap windows to certain sizes and, zones on your computer, basically. And he was asking about how to do it with AutoHotkeys and fancy zones. So AutoHotkeys really isn't going to work with the fancy zones that are built into PowerToys, but you can basically kind of mimic it. You will have to do it manually. Honestly, I would go with just using fancy zones and PowerToys, but you could use like WinMove and just kind of put the coordinates of where you want your window. You could say like, if window exists, Chrome, snap to, these corners with WinMove. And that would basically mimic fancy zones. But unfortunately, AHK definitely cannot grab that information from that program. So you're going to have to do it a little bit more manually than you normally would.
Well, and I don't want to say disagree necessarily, but it's possible if we worked at it for hours, maybe we could, right? I'm just saying, but it gets back to somewhere. But the PowerToys is connecting to the Windows API and driving the Windows API and doing stuff. So why don't we just connect directly to what it's manipulating and do stuff with that, right? And there's also, I don't remember the names of them, but there's tools on the forum where you can say, like, make sure if I know has one, which I could find, where you could say, hey, take a snapshot of where these programs are and remember it. So when they load again, go put them back there, right? And that to me is like, hey, why not?
Yeah, and I've actually done a program like that where you push one hotkey, it grabs the information of the coordinates and pixels and all that, and you can snap it back later. That would be the easiest way if you're going to use AutoHotkey. But as much as I love AutoHotkey, I always tell people, why reinvent the wheel? Fancy Zone already
Absolutely
much works. I would just stick with it.
Yeah. Back to Dan's. Well, I think he asked for a specific example. Now here, this is a little more complicated because in this tool I released the other day, we have a list of stuff that we get and we shove into a menu, but this is the same general approach, right? Here's the action. You back up the clipboard. I blank it out. This is where I will shove. Now in this one, I'm grabbing what I've selected from the menu, but here's where you would set the clipboard to your value you wanted. And then I use clip wait to make sure you wait until the clipboard has a value. That way you get around some issues with errors. Send the paste. And then here I'm sleeping 100, so 1/10 of a second. And then I restore the clipboard.
Yep.
Easy peasy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I do this process so much in my main script, but I have a lot of private stuff in there, so I don't want to jump to it. I put like this top end and the bottom end in two separate functions because I call this kind of approach a lot. So I'm like, hey, you know what? Let me just make functions for these, and then I can refer to them and not have this 80 million times.
Yeah, definitely. I've done that with like clipboard errors. Did auto close them every 50 milliseconds. But instead of, like you're saying, calling them constantly, just have it in one section called upon. It's way better. As long as you don't forget where it is.
Tyler, I think granted, the problem is that we've done over 60 now. I remember I featured it, I think, in a webinar as a tool. So we probably described it a bit there. I put the link, to the forum up above, but I don't think I have apparently I don't have a special video just on it. I should. It's an amazing tool. But yeah.
Which tool is this again?
The Linta list.
Oh, okay.
And then
definitely want to see that.
Lasha was asking about, does AutoHotkey have ARM support? And are you meaning ARM as in like the CPU type of thing? That's where I'm confused.
What's the username?
Lasha.
Oh, okay.
How does backing up the clipboard interact with clipboard history? I don't know.
Yeah, I was like,
it won't. The backing up won't. The restoring of it will. Now the question is, will Windows detect that, hey, in the past I had the same exact thing here multiple times, so I'm not going to show you in your history multiple times. I'm just going to keep it once. I would think it's smart enough to realize they're identical, and so why put it in there multiple times?
Yeah, I think it's just like an order of operations kind of thing. It's a good question. I've never had to mess with something like that before.
Yeah, I mean, I could test it out here in a heartbeat. It's not a big deal. But again, I assume, and who was the one that asked that? Tyler. You're talking about the new Windows 10 clipboard history, or I guess just any? No, because the other ones are manually tracking it, right? So yeah, any tool that's actually keeping track of the history is a program keeping. It's not a built-in Windows thing. Well, sorry, in Windows 10 they have one, but my point is, the clipboard management itself doesn't have a history, right? Some other tools managing that.
Yeah.
And Windows, for those of you that don't know, sorry, in Windows 10, Windows V, it can bring up your clipboard history, right? It's a built-in tool, which is really cool. Sorry, Tom, what were you saying?
I have a video where I kind of played around a little bit with the history, and then just using it to go into like my own custom-made context menu that I just wanted to program to be a little bit smoother than what Windows provided. I forget the name of that video. What was it? I think I just called it Better Clipboard.
Yeah, there's a lot of, obviously, if you search the forum, there's like 100 clipboard managers, right? It's crazy. It's one of the big things. But thankfully, I really don't like the Windows V built-in Windows 10 version. If they didn't have it as the space bar being the thing to activate it, I mean, that to me is crazy. And how you can make a sticky, but the sticky doesn't stay at the top. The sticky gets, you got to scroll down to find it. It's ludicrous. But hey, they're starting to, to get there.
Yeah. I would definitely check out that one video I did, because I just basically took the same idea of what Windows 10 was doing, but I made it a little better. I'm pretty sure it's just called Better Clipboard. I wasn't very clever on that name, but I guess it gets the point through.
Well, and you know what? Also, sorry, I forget who on here asked, but I have a post on it. Let me find that one where I think it was Lexico. Someone gave an example in the forum of how to store and paste RTF, how to shove RTF into your clipboard. And so I'm like, oh, this is badass. I'm going to make a thing. Now I can have hot strings or hotkeys that shove in RTF. I remember I made a video on that.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
and
and
the
that
first videos I think I ever watched of yours.
That's hilarious. That's awesome.
The first video I ever watched of yours was Selenium, and then I think it was something.
Oh God.
That was one of the first 5 videos I watched of yours back in the day. Yeah,
it's funny.
Selenium solutions.
Oh, I still get a lot of people writing me about it. I'm like, I haven't touched that ever, in years. And I'm like, yeah.
I did 2 videos on Selenium, and I was like, cool. That's all I got.
Well, you know what, Tom, and this is a good segue. At least to the topic of V2, right? And the thing that you had said we were going to bring up, because Selenium, when I was looking at Selenium, it would reminded me of when I was learning AutoHotkey. And at the time, AutoHotkey, this is like 10 years ago, there was the vanilla version and then the HKL, right? And the syntax was drastically different, right? And so when you're doing like COM type things, the vanilla version didn't have it built in. So it was really crazy kind of the code you had to write, versus in the new AutoHotkey L, it was so much easier to read. Well, the what's it called? What were why we brought Selenium? Yeah. When I was looking for code examples for that, it seemed like a very similar thing, that it was in the middle of this rendition change where they had this really crazy syntax and then one much more streamlined. And hopefully by now, because the other one was the Windows version that you go to install, and it was like, this is like 3 years ago now, 4 years ago, somewhere in there, where it's like, hey, we're about to release the new version, blah, blah, blah. And it stayed that way for as long as I followed it, which was a couple of years. And finally, I'm like, whatever, clearly they're not releasing this thing. But this segues into your and I's discussion the other day of the whole AutoHotkey version 2, right? And why don't you go ahead? You were the one that remembered to talk about it. You bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing complex, but we've both done videos on V2, so we're not going to dive too deep into it. But with this transition happening, there's so many scripts out there that probably like over 90% of all the scripts right now on the internet are going to be version 1. But especially if you're new to AutoHotkeys, you're not really going to be very well at telling the difference between the two, basically. So we were talking about how we should all get like really in the habit of our very first line of code, or at least somewhere up there, should just be like commented out and just say AutoHotkey V1 or AHK V2. That way, if you ever do share your script, someone's going to see it, and right away they're going to know, this is version 1, this is version 2. Can I use it? Or how do I run it? So I think that's just a practice we should really get into, because it's going to be weird. I'm sure me and Joe, there's going to be a lot of times where we're just going to grab a script real quick, run it, and be like, oh, wait, it's not launching. I'm getting errors. It's because it's version 2. Now, I'm not saying go back to all your scripts that you've currently written. If you're me and Joe, that's a bit insane. But if you at least start throwing V2 in your new scripts.
Here's the thing, though, and whether we do it with AutoHotkey versus another tool like grepwin or whatever, because I have yet to write any scripts in version 2, I can just say go to every AutoHotkey script I have and go add that as a header, not the header of the files, whatever, at the top of it, to say version 1, because Yeah. And then what I was hoping to do is to talk to like Tank or Joe DF or somebody on the forum and say, hey, is this something you guys could do, for us as well, before we get inundated with version 2 in here and get it really confusing, which is the painful thing. Like I said, when I first started, I used AutoHotkey for 3 years of just using hotkeys and hot strings. And then I changed jobs and I started learning COM and dot notation and all this stuff. And that was when it was switching from vanilla to the version L. And I was so confused. And I would love to avoid that for people.
Yeah. And even if you don't think you're going to be sharing your script, you never know. There's so many times where you're on a sub or something and someone's asking, you're like, oh, I wrote a script that does that. And, you never plan to share that script, but suddenly you are. You might as well just go ahead and throw that, AHK version 2 commented out in there now and save your time and the other person's time, later down the road. It takes, 5 seconds to write that line of code. And it's going to make it's going to make the transition a lot smoother and probably, help push it a little bit faster forward.
I see people still talking about ARM, and they were talking about the ARM processor, instead of like the x64, whatever the normal CPUs we have in Windows. And there's a thing called Wine. It's Windows for Linux, I think, something like that. I've tried running it on my phone and I didn't have good success, but supposedly, because I talked to Tank and Tank said he's done it on a phone and had some functionality of AutoHotkey within like a phone and using Linux.
Interesting. I've used Wine, but it's been probably like 10 years ago. It's funny because I actually had my Linux computer sitting right over here on the floor because I got it out of the at the garage the other day.
I don't know if
it's look into that, especially on the phone. That would be kind of cool to see if what exactly you can do with it.
So, and I don't know if Ryan's still here, but Ryan Wells and we had a call just the other day. We were chatting, and because he was kind of wanting to do something similar, be able to do stuff on his phone, and he was looking into Wine. And I, but why don't you just get like an Amazon cloud, Windows instance and run your stuff there, and then you can still have stuff in the cloud running. But it's now if you actually want to do it on your phone, that's now the other one. And Tom, I think I sent you a video. Did you watch the AppSheet stuff? I think you looked at it a little bit. Yeah. That one was. It looked amazing. Yeah. No, and it's not programming, right? However, you can, often you want to do stuff from your phone to collect information of what you're doing or change something. And the fact that you can write an app, basically an app that'll run on an iPhone or an Android or a desktop, because it'll be like a browser interface. That's freaking amazing to me. So it's on my to-do list of working through some sessions and really starting to learn how to use that.
Yeah, same. No, I definitely want to check that out. I've been kind of looking at it here and there, reading people's, reviews on it. And it's really popular, especially in large businesses for like data crunching and, sharing information. Now, going back to that Wine thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to look into it because I am curious, but I forget the name of the app, but there is a really good app there that kind of works like AutoHotkeys in the sense of just automating your phone. You can set timers that send text at certain times. It can even do some like very basic like web scraping and stuff. I actually have that on my to-do list somewhere to check out that app. But if there's something already out there, I don't see myself digging too deep into trying to get AutoHotkeys on my phone when there's already a bunch of apps that can do tons of automation that's already built for you.
And the other one, which Ryan chimed in here, I just realized again, you're looking at your YouTube channel, right? So you don't see this chat, right? So yeah, okay. In my head, we were both looking at this. That's why I'm like, yeah, I need to be repeating more of this. Ryan, because he had mentioned it too. He was like, hey, the other thing, and I've done this before myself, is you could use Dropbox as a way to write some basic stuff and save it as a file, to your Dropbox file on your phone, and then have the thing in the Windows cloud or just your own PC checking that folder and watching for things, and then have it run, remotely, right? And which I'm like, it's a great little workaround if you're doing something simple that you could do. Yeah, Tasker, I've used Tasker on Android. It's pretty powerful, and I think free, right? Mostly free. There's
I actually have Tasker, I think. That's what it was. Wait, do I have Tasker on my? I had something on my desktop that was supposed to be really cool. I forget where it is. Yeah, Tasker is the one I hear a lot of people talking about.
I'm trying to remember if that was the one. Jackie and I, at one point, we were trying to get, I think it was Tasker. We were in chats with the person that develops it to do a webinar with us about automating your phone. And then we would talk about, automating with AutoHotkey and this and that. And I think he was in Brazil or somewhere. And it was just the timing. We just had a hard time. We never lined it up. But it is a very powerful tool.
Yeah. I have that on my to-do list to do. I do a lot of AutoHotkey stuff, but I do. Every once in a while I'll throw out an automation stuff. So do you. So that's definitely one I have a huge list. If anybody's curious, this is my notebook where I keep all my AutoHotkey.
Are you sharing your screen? Oh, there. Oh, it's a literal. Yeah, I remember you showing me that. That's awesome.
So I got all my notes in there, and all the stuff.
You don't have kids, do you, Tom?
Yeah. My daughter, so yeah. There's all my notes. I love this thing.
So, and that's awesome. Don't get me wrong. I think that's awesome. Another one, because Faulkner I saw was here earlier, was he had asked, he wanted, well, let me share my screen here, right? Because this is the script he shared. But he was like, let me move my start menu out of the way just so we have more screen.
Oh, is this one of those ones on the Excel file?
Yes. This is the only one we submitted where we actually have, at least at the beginning, we had I think someone else maybe did something.
Oh, yeah.
But
okay, the list view.
Yeah. And he was wanting to be able to, we're under, interpreting it. He wanted to be able to hit a hotkey to trigger these things. My first thing I would say is, why don't you just use QAP, right? QAP, Quick Access Popup. That's what it does. It's amazing. Like here, yeah, I can bring this up and I can assign a hotkey or a hot string, like actually in here, if we pick some of these, here, this FRU period, that's a hot string that'll pull this up. Or you could assign, I don't know if I have any hotkeys. There we go. Here's a hotkey and it shows you, but it's built into it. It's so easy. And you can have little picture icons as well. You can have
customize.
You can add, like, let's say I want to add a new, either a snippet. So I use snippets a lot, right? But you can add a shortcut to a folder or a URL or a document. You could have groups of things. I mean, it's crazy, crazy powerful. And the other thing is,
for opening folders and websites is my main usage for it.
I use that a lot. Yeah. And then I use it a lot for writing HTML. I have a lot of my stuff for little snippets of things. Like, Tom, let's say you have a banner that you use a lot, or certain, actually, let me go back to here. Any post I like under my, wait a minute, that's the wrong Automator. Oh, here we go. So there's my folders, pages. So here are my main pages, right? And these are just URLs. So I could be, responding to somebody and have, I don't have to go look up the page to give it to them. Or here's a playlist, one of my playlists, right? Or I have a lot more than that. Here are some very popular posts. Here are links to webinars we've done, things I use a lot, right? So it's very handy to be able to have those at the tips of your fingers and not have to go find them every time.
I like the skull icon there. So obviously, for people watching this, you can customize your icons too.
Right.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. And FYI, so Jean he just announced it the other day, but it's not that well known. He was a paid program where, he was, if you had a free version, but you could pay to have everything, but he's switched back to being donationware. And so it's basically, as powerful as you want. And if you like it a lot, maybe give them some money.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was just recent, very recent.
And that's live now, where it's free but donation.
Yes, right. That's the way it is now. Yeah.
Nice.
So back to this tool. So in it, and I had it running. If I run it and then Control Shift F1, which I can't hit on my keyboard, but so this brings up a GUI, and I think his point was he wanted to be able to select it, but also to be able to just hit the hotkey to automatically have it run, right? And that's where I don't work with GUIs enough to come up with here's how you would solve that. But I am sure there are ways to do it, right? You could probably pull this, grab this info, and then treat that as a dynamic hotkey and assign it or something and jump to it.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, I would use a context menu, basically like what you were showing just now. I think that's cleaner. It's easier.
Yeah,
the GUI is going to open in the same spot every time, probably is how he has it.
right.
You can
Right.
open at your, get mouse position. That's going to be way cleaner, way better. You can still use hotkeys in it.
So this one, and here I'm just triggering hot strings, so this will dump it in wherever it is. But yeah, that general concept, right? And then I don't know if you want to mention what you were saying, which I like the general idea. It's just a little more work, right? To put a number, preface this with a number, and then you could just use a regular expression to parse it, and so it strips out the number when you go to paste it, because you obviously don't want that. But this would aid you when you pull it up. When this comes up you could hit the number and it would jump to it and then hit enter, and then your hands stay on the keyboard, which
versus having to use the mouse,
right.
if it's not a big deal, but I've had moments where something as simple as adding that number into the front and not having to use my mouse.
Sure.
If I'm using that thing 100 times a day, it's going to add up very quick by the end of the year. So it's like something you want to do. Here's another thing too that might help. I'll just shoot it to you in a chat. It's just, if you want to have a live way of creating a hotkey versus having to code it all, this is a simple string you can use right here using a variable. So that might help out if you're not, I'm not sure exactly what he's doing here, if he's switching them up or something. But that one helps. So you put like variable equals, F1 or something, or an input box, however you want to do it, or have it, cycle through the GUI. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing or what his goal is, but that might be something worth looking at.
Cool.
I don't know if you've ever used that kind of style of, I call them user-defined hotkeys.
I don't, what's funny is I have literally never written hotkey code that uses the hotkey command. Like I don't, Isaiah does it all the time, and I'm like, I don't write them that way. It's just because I don't, I'm not doing it with my hotkeys. Are just very basic usually.
Yeah. No, I don't use it very often, but there has been times where I do allow, especially if it's like at a business where they're going to be sharing, I do allow them to select their own hotkey, and then I might just have it write to like an INI file so they don't have to enter it every single time.
Yeah. I was looking at all the stuff, Ryan. So Ryan, he's actually in marketing, and right now he's currently in Italy, but he gets around a lot. And but he is a total whiz at 8 million different way approaches. And it's him and we get on calls, and it's fun because we often use AutoHotkey, but even I know for talking to Tom too, it's not the only thing we use, right? And it's just fun to be able to brainstorm on different ways you can do stuff and see other things that are out there. Now, the one thing I love though is, API calls are such an easy way to be able to connect to so many platforms, and that you can do them very easy, and AutoHotkey is great.
Oh yeah. It's way better than the URL download.
Well, and actually
we did everything.
Yeah. And to clarify, right, is when I say API call, that's the other one I really wish they had a different term for it, right? I was using web service API calls, which is like an endpoint where you're submitting queries to a website and connecting with the data. But there's APIs like Python has an API, right? I have written AutoHotkey code where inside Python I have AutoHotkey code, and inside AutoHotkey I reference Python code because I'm connecting to Python programmatically. And so those are APIs. There's a lot of APIs. It's just a very nebulous term, application programming interface. Yeah, very vague. Did anybody else have anything?
A little bit. I've done like JavaScript to help me communicate with Chrome using AutoHotkey. It's really weird to do, but ever since we lost comms, got to find some weird ways to do stuff sometimes.
No, actually, that was my first go-to when I realized I can just inject JavaScript into Chrome. And I'm like, well, you know what? It's quote unquote simple compared to Geek Dude's training where he teaches me, and I'm like, oh dude, like you're blowing my mind.
HK, yeah.
Yeah.
I rather go. It's hackery, but it works pretty smooth. I've never had much of issue with injecting using AutoHotkey to inject JavaScript into Chrome. It's actually surprisingly not that bad.
Can we get an Excel spreadsheet of data? I don't. It just so. Let's back up a step, Deanne. Like if you're connecting, if there's a file on your computer that you're trying, it's an Excel file. That's where I would use COM to go grab that file, open it, do whatever you want. It's amazing. It's so powerful. Now, if that Excel file,
open it, you can call upon data without even opening it, visually too, which is nice.
Well, sure, yeah. Depends how you define opening it, but fair enough, right? Oh, yeah. And then there's like in the tool I use to collect feedback for this live office hours. It used to be called Survey Gizmo. Now it's Alchemy, I think, or whatever. They have an API, and I can programmatically, they have a database of info there that gets exported into Excel, but I can programmatically do API calls and piecemeal exactly the data I want from it, right? And if this was something that Tom and I do a lot, that's what I would do. Is I'm not going to manually go export an Excel file every time, and because what happened in this episode, which reminds me, there's someone had added an extra question right at the last minute. We need to go back and look at what that was. But I exported everything. And then as we were talking, I'm like, wait a minute, someone just submitted something and I had already exported it and made it pretty. So I'm like, I'd have to do that all over again. So I don't want to do that. So the API is usually provided by more often than not one of your vendors, and they might have an API that you can programmatically connect to and basically do queries and pull stuff out of the Excel file usually is really data in a database that they have dumped into a format that's an Excel file that you download, right? So you're getting it from the actual database, which is just even better. And Tom, what about Tom, man?
I should probably get Excel.
Oh, yeah.
I've always been a Google Sheets guy, which unfortunately is a pain to use with AutoHotkey sometimes.
Well, so help me understand, because I think I've done stuff with Smart Sheets. They have an API, and you can program to do stuff. I thought there was an API for Google Sheets. Is that not the case?
So here's the thing about Google. They change and discontinue APIs all the time. I mean, there's so many times where I'm trying to work through a problem. I'm like, I know there's an API here, and it's like, oh, it was discontinued last week. And I'm like, what? Like they just, for some reason, they drop support constantly, but then they'll bring it back like a year later. So for me, it's like, I always feel so uncomfortable when it comes to Google and trying to do API stuff, because I'm like, there's a good chance this is going to just be completely broken in 2 months. And
that's so weird, because normally, my options are usually it's like 3. One is, in some ways, I'm sending some sort of keystrokes to a browser to do web scraping of some sort, right? Option B is I'm connecting with COM, whether it's, to IE or with Chrome, and programmatically doing it. And then C is, there's actually a D now I think about it. C is actually, to keep it more linear, C would be the one that I hadn't thought of, was I used Fiddler to look at my API traffic, and I programmatically fake the traffic that my browser was doing, which allows me to programmatically do all this stuff. And then option D is they actually have an API that I need my OAuth to connect to and get, configured with that. But once I do, it's very, very structured. And that's what Tom was just referring to with the Google's API, right? That's the APIs, that's that option D there. Typically, those are by far the most stable compared to connecting to a web page with web scraping and stuff, right? Obviously, when you're sending keystrokes to any sort of browser, that is very prone to issues. The IE approach was great, but web pages changes a lot, right? So the API web service usually rarely changes. Now, what Tom's saying is the Google API says not even that they change, it's that they just cut them off. Yeah.
There's so many things. Like I was trying to, actually a few days ago, I was working on a weather app that based on the weather outside changes your desktop wallpaper to match. You know, if it's sunny outside, you get a wallpaper that shows like the sun shining or something, just for fun. And I was trying to use the Google Weather Service or whatever it was called, and it took me forever. Like, it's there, but it doesn't work anymore. So I finally just ended up using the Microsoft's API and doing it that way. And I compared it to using like a URL download. But so far on Google Sheets, the best I've came up with is doing a URL download, unfortunately. Thankfully, they don't change that often. You know, Excel style stuff pretty much stays Excel style stuff. They're not doing anything crazy to change up the site. But that's the best I've been came up with, unfortunately. It's been, like you said, it's kind of the way you don't want to do it, but it's the best I've came up. And that's why I'm saying I should really get Excel, because then I can like do a lot of stuff like comms and stuff, which will be way smoother.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. And to back up a step, you know, I hate ever saying it's quote unquote the way, like, you know, it depends on how often you're going to use it, what your time frame is. Because for me, often the OAuth takes me ridiculous amount of time to work through, and then the actual API endpoint is simple, like doing the stuff. It's the stupid authorization, getting that to work, and that's where, like the IE, you could leverage your IE cookies that you're logged in and not even have to take care of that. For instance, and by the way, here, which I don't think I'm sharing anything privileged, under my dashboard in Google here, these are like the APIs I've connected to and used. Oh, and someone's trying to join. Oh, it's Dan. Cool. But yeah, I've played with a lot of just from Google, right? But I have, you know, tons and tons of different APIs I've connected to. It's crazy how many are out there.
Yeah,
like, you know, 20,000. Yeah. This is just the Google. And I haven't had that issue that you have, Tom, with, but I often have, once I play with one, I don't go back to it and play with it. So I will admit that.
No. Everything else I've done has been beautiful. It's just, I don't know what's going on with Google. Like they'll just like drop support for stuff out of nowhere. And you're like, what the heck? Like dropping your weather service. It was just like, really? That seems like something that would be big for you guys.
Right.
But I don't pretend to know how billion-dollar companies work.
Right.
We got someone connecting.
Yeah, well, let me ask him to unmute. I assume that's why he joined, was he wants to ask a question.
Cool. And then we got that Zoom one that I'll let you handle that, because I've only ever used Zoom twice in my life. You're gonna know at least somewhat better.
Well, it was
video, so I got some basic, but that's it.
Yeah. Let me stop sharing here too, just to, and hopefully Dan, you there yet?
Hi. How many people are tuned in? I'm curious.
I'd say about 10,000.
Wow.
I'm kidding. I don't know. It looks like about 8 to 10 easily, you know, something like that. So it's more than I was expecting. So I'm very happy with it.
All right. And so I didn't even know Google allowed, I didn't even know that YouTube allowed in two-way conversation. I have used Zoom before.
We're on Zoom, yeah, and we're both streaming separately.
So, but the computer I'm on doesn't have a camera.
Oh, no worries. Yeah.
And anyway, so I'm glad, a bit surprised. So I sent you a very general question. I don't particularly expect a definitive answer. And it's one that it's not a coding question. And it might be just that this is the nature of life and I should expect it. But sometimes my scripts stop working unpredictably, and it's not a problem. I just reload them. And when one of the web pages or web blogs, I came across the very useful suggestion, which you probably told people about too, where you can have the tray icon have a different letter. So I know which one I need to restart. And that's very handy. I came across that in one of the discussion groups. So I assign a different letter. I have about 6 scripts running for my work purposes, and I put a different letter on each one. So I know which one to restart. And that's fine. And it tends that they stop working if I've been away from the computer longer, but it's not predictable. Sometimes I can be away for 10 hours and it come back and it's still working. Other times it stops in a half hour. It might be that some other program I'm running interferes with it, or it might be just like when programs stall for whatever odd reason they stall. And I was curious if that's your experience or not.
Yeah, we were talking about this actually earlier in the video. So Joe doesn't have as much experience, and like he was kind of saying was, 99% of the time he's had an issue like that, it's been because, his code, maybe something just not working the way it should be. So obviously that's should always be where you go. But no, at my old job, we have hundreds of people using our scripts, and we came across that same problem. And like you said, you don't expect a definitive answer, so you're not really going to get one, just more theories here. We had problems where it was like you said, it was just random. And it was like some people, the same script worked perfectly flawless, no issues. But then someone over here, sitting next to you, it was like every 6 hours, it would completely lock up or something. So at the beginning of the video, I just did a quick script that's just a set timer. Have it go off maybe every 4 hours, depending on how often it's happening to you, and then just have it do a reload. If you have any important variables you need to save, you can always put those into like an INI file, or put them into the clipboard temporarily and have them come back when the script runs. But if there's no important variables, just set timer, reload. That's really all you need.
And Dan, did it make sense when I said, hey, the other thing I would do is when it doesn't work, come in and hopefully you can double click it and look at the last lines that had executed, right? And hopefully that will help you understand what's going on.
And I have not tried that yet, but that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It might give me a clue about whether it's, just a Windows problem that things stop working from time to time, which I expect with Windows, or something that I can figure out. Let's see, there was something I was going to say.
If you do figure it out, let me know, because I've been trying for years to figure it out and never did. It could be a memory leak. It could just be, something wrong with your code. There's just so many theories out there on what it could be.
Oh.
And your problem, even though it seems similar, could be completely different than, the issue I'm having.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Is chances are there's just a lot of different tiny little things. On one, you have a certain, what are they called? The different things from Windows, not even different versions of it, but I can't think of what they're called.
Oh, the smaller than the versions. Yeah. I know what you mean.
Infrastructure kind of stuff they have in the background, and it just,
builds perhaps.
Oh, too. Yeah. I was thinking the network, the .NET framework, and stuff as well. But anyway, there's just so many things. Yeah.
Tom, you mentioned something that was a little unclear. The restart, is that within the script that's having the problems itself, or is that a separate script that's restarting?
Yeah, here, hold on real quick. I'll actually think I still have the code pulled up. Yeah, here we go. So
I'm guessing it has to be a separate script because the script itself has stopped.
Well, this should still, so this is more like getting ahead of the game before it freezes. But no, if it freezes, there's nothing really you can do except for what.
That's an intriguing idea. Have a separate script running that restarts the problem script.
Yeah, and you could do basically the same thing here, but instead of a reload, just doing like a close it out, relaunch it, a run command.
Is reload a AutoHotkey command? I have never used that one. Okay, I'll have to explore that.
Yeah, what I do is in my main script, I use my main script to kick off all my other scripts that I have running. And so I have a hotkey that will reload my main script, which therefore goes and triggers a reload of all my other scripts.
That's a very useful idea. I probably could have thought of it myself, but somehow talking to other people gives stimulation.
This is what Jackie and I in our podcast talk about a lot. Talk to other people, and suddenly it's why I talk to Tom and to Ryan and John and Jackie and all these people, because it's just crazy how many things you get to borrow. You're like, oh my God, I never, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, it's awesome.
Right now, I am using a timer for something I'm sure many people do. I mostly am using for work, and the work computer times out if I haven't used it for like 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And I have a program that sends the F24 key, which is not used for anything. And every 2 minutes, it sends F24 if I have not pressed the keyboard recently. So there's a AutoHotkey as a way of telling how recently you pressed the keyboard. If I haven't pressed the keyboard in 2 minutes, I have it send F24, and it keeps the work computer from ever logging me out. And that's really handy.
Yeah, I've done the same thing, but in the opposite direction at work, where if you haven't pressed in so long, go ahead and lock the computer just for security reasons. So same idea, but just in reversed theory there.
Go ahead.
My buddy, he used to just have to do a mouse move, a tiny mouse move every, 10 minutes or, a little bit under it to avoid it.
I tried that, but that's more annoying having the mouse move live, and the F24 was so innocuous.
Yeah, that's smart.
Well, it was a slight jig. It moved there and back so fast that anyway, but I understand your point. Now, the other one that I found that was freaking brilliant, and people, because when I worked at TI, they had us every 90 days create these crazy passwords that you could never reuse. You had to pick from a list. They had to have an uppercase letter and a number and special character, all the stuff you could never remember. So one, I wrote a tool to go through and actually show me which ones were the best and easiest to remember. But the second one I did was, if we walked away from our computers and left the screens on, we could get a ticket, from the IT people, because security reasons, as Tom's mentioning. So I have a hotkey where I hit it and it kills my screens, the power, right? And it kills all the buttons except for a couple that only I know. And so I can come back, hit another hotkey, and everything comes back up, but I don't have to type that stupid password.
I love that.
Yeah.
I should have done that.
Yeah, I have a hotkey for my password. In fact, often I'm doing remote work and I use RDP. And so I have a AutoHotkey on my home computer for the password. And many of the scripts have to be on the work computer itself because they're interacting with programs there. So the main things I need in my home computer are the my password.
Yeah, I remember, because I used to remote in, and I had the same, because thankfully they allowed Dropbox. And so everything I do was under Dropbox with the same exact paths. And so at home, even my desktop was actually the same desktop as my work computer, because I moved it all under Dropbox. And so everything was the same. But then I was getting confused because I hit a hotkey and I thought it was running on the remote computer, but running on my computer. And so that took me a little bit of like, okay, how do I have the same hotkey but trigger it on that computer, not on my computer, because I have the same scripts running?
So I had that issue as well on how I solved it. Again, none of this is highly creative, but I didn't want to use up all the built-in second function keys or whatever the things you press first, like the control or the alt. So I'm using F8 and F9 I hold that down as my key. On an aside, I didn't realize at first that destroys the function of those, but fortunately I don't use F8 or F9 for anything. But so F8 is my local and F9 is my distant. So I keep track of which one is which that way.
Well, you should be able to, put is it the tilde or the asterisk? The tilde, right? That'll be a pass through, right? So it doesn't eat it up. But what I ended up doing,
I'll have to explore that.
What I did was, if I remember correctly, I told it to look at the computer name, and no, that wasn't it either. Maybe I just used the active window and said, if the active window is my remote desktop Citrix thing, then to not do stuff. I forget exactly how I solved it, because it was really annoying.
Yeah, the F8, F9 seems to be working pretty well for me. And so even if I forgot to have, for some reason my work computer still times out, I can use the password. It's expecting me to enter a password to refresh it. And I can use my local F8 to give the password.
Right.
Yeah, I've done that. Not for Citrix, but for other stuff like video games and stuff. It's definitely nice to have.
Zach, right
Use
now
it,
it just did.
text me whatever password I need to use, like password 1, click, doom, fills it in. Username 2, you can do.
So
Tab down.
and I have mine with it's Alt and then F1, F2 through F6 that'll send different passwords. And you can find this in one of my videos. My passwords aren't stored in a plain text file. I mean, I'm sorry, they are, but they're somewhat encrypted. And so I have a function that decrypts. So the value itself, like let's say my password was my password, the text isn't my password. The text will be crazy characters, right? So the file, if someone gets it, they can't see it. And then I store the functions only locally on the computer. So I can't accidentally share my passwords with people. You know what I mean? Because I'd have to purposely go find that function and share that function, which I never do. But it was a nice way to save my files. Now, a good hacker could figure it out because they're not actually encrypted. They're just kind of
Like
shifted
places or something.
It's a hash, but it's just not complex because I started looking at all that stuff and I'm like, hey, I'll just do that. And I finally said, oh my God, never mind. You know what?
It's better than nothing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't had to be very security conscious because I'm the only one using my home computer, and the work computer already has its own system where each person logs in separately. At least I think it's secure to anyone other than the IST people themselves.
Right.
And for passwords, so I don't have to alter my password program, I have it use the include function. So I have a small text file, which contrary to your purposes is completely readable and have my username and password. That way, when I have to change it every month, I can only have to change it in the text file that's used as an include.
Well, and I'll put the link in the chat, but I made a tool that I can put in my password, straight away, and it encrypts it for me. And then that has the same function that decrypts it, but it allows me to not save it in but if you're remote, I mean, yeah, it's probably not a big issue.
Personal, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen people use kind of like what Joe was saying for authentication reasons for programs that they want to sell or something. I mean, it helps a little bit, but if someone has any basic understanding of code, they're still going to get around it. So still be careful.
So one of my first meetings at TI, the first important meetings where I go into the room and I'm sitting there with the director, which at TI is a very high position, and then this other director, but one's like my boss's boss and the other one is another. Anyway, and I'm presenting and I go, and they look at me and I'm like, and I pull out, I'm like, I'm sorry. And I pull out my wallet and I have a sticky and they all laugh. They're like, trust me, they have to write them down because that's how crazy the passwords were. Right. And they, no one could remember them. And it's one of those things, there's a big tech argument of when you make them so complicated that people end up writing them down and put a sticky on their computers. And I just told people, look, if you're going to do that, pick the 6th character, the 8th, whatever I want to be consistent with it and move it to the beginning. So, hey, this is it, but I always got to transpose this one, right? Or add an extra one, that of that they don't know. That way it's not exactly it, right?
Manual encryption.
Exactly, right. It's better than nothing.
It's
right?
funny, but it's a good idea.
Yeah.
What I've always done is I'll create a normal password and I'll just duplicate it. So if my password's Thomas123, it's going to be Thomas123, Thomas123. That helps a little bit.
Sorry, you lost what?
For when those complex passwords, I'll just use a normal size password like you'd use for Facebook or something, and I just duplicate it. So when I go to type, I'll type in Thomas123, Thomas123. That way I'm not having to come.
Oh, I'm sorry. I get it. Okay. Yeah, I missed you're duplicating it. I thought you just said. Anyway,
that's not my real password, guys.
You're doubling it, so to speak, or whatever. But all right, yeah.
I'm about to get hit with a bunch of Facebook attempt logins now.
So I didn't know you could do two-way on. Well, actually, I don't have a Facebook account. I actually work at a hospital, and we were strongly discouraged not to have Facebook accounts. I was told that amongst other things, even if a patient finds out yours and sends you info, you can be blamed for disclosing the stuff that they mentioned themselves. And so we were strongly discouraged from having things like Facebook.
Oh, that's weird. I mean, it makes sense, I guess.
I don't have a Facebook account. I'm probably one of the few people in the country. I didn't know that YouTube could be used as two-way conversation.
Well, this is Zoom, right?
Yeah, I'm on Zoom.
Yeah.
I've used that before.
But you can, we're streaming, on Zoom, and just because it was simple, I picked my YouTube channel, and then Tom is also using OBS and then streaming to his YouTube channel. So both of us are watching our chats there, but we're using Zoom as the commonality. And maybe next time, or if we keep doing this, we'll figure out how to also bring in Facebook and stream there as well. But it just gets to be complicated.
That's fine. Here's an unrelated topic, and since no one else is here, I might as well ask. I have done some learning of Python, and it seems like a neat language. Are there ways to interact between AutoHotkey and Python? I've actually used AutoHotkey more than I use Python, but I think I've written some simple things. Python has a lot of built-in things that people have already written. Perhaps neither of you have done this, but Python isn't lending itself as easily to interacting with your existing programs, or at least I don't know how, compared to AutoHotkey. Is one very simple thing is, how do you exchange data between your Python program and your AutoHotkey program if you choose to use both?
I have a post in the forum where I showed how I was doing it.
Okay, I will look for that.
Yeah, but you can, and from memory, because I totally get, the Python API can connect to Windows API and do some stuff. There's, I think, called send keys function in Python, where you can send keystrokes, but that's a really bad way to automate things, but you could do that. Other than that, I'm not sure. There is the general Windows API, which is very nebulous because it's hard to pin down what's actually in the API and what's not, right? But with Python, I think you can connect to some of the stuff. You could probably do DLL calls. Do you know, Tom? I haven't done Python in a few years now.
I don't think I've ever done a DLL call with Python. Really, it's just been JavaScript and AutoHotkeys mostly. That's a good question. I'm sure you can. You have to be able to, I would think. Yeah, you can do keyboard, .press, I think it is, and then whatever key you want, but that's definitely not the way to go.
Right. And actually, Tom, maybe we should plan this for a call sometime. A video where I talk through, it was actually from a call I was on with Ryan Wells. We were talking about it. And it really helped me, because when Jackie and I do our podcasts and webinars, and we always say, look, we all start somewhere, right? And most people with AutoHotkey start off automating by sending keystrokes or mouse clicks, right? Most of us also agree that's usually not the ideal way. Sometimes if you want something dirty and fast, fine, you just get it and get it done. Usually there's a better approach. Usually there's an API type approach. And that's how it finally dawned on me, I'm pretending to be a human and I'm sending keystrokes or mouse clicks and stuff. And then there's some function of an API where I'm programmatically, whether it's an API, web service, or an actual API like we were talking about with Python, which I put the link in the chat, Dan, but I'll also put it in YouTube for the thread I did on Python with AutoHotkey, where you're, in using the older controls with AutoHotkey, or even the Windows menus. I have a post where I have 17 different ways to programmatically connect to programs with AutoHotkey, right? And that's where there's so many better ways than sending keystrokes. Again, I'm not saying I don't do it, but it's just, I try not to do it.
And how do you get the info about the APIs? Depends on the program. Some of them release it more than others. One way is to explore the AutoHotkey forums and see if someone has already figured it out.
Yeah, always do that first.
Google's your friend. Yeah, I have a post on this of how to search for stuff, but I have a hotkey. I hit my caps lock and S. It pulls up with an input box so I can type my search. It uses Google to search the AutoHotkey forum, Stack Overflow, and then I have other options I have turned off. But there's 5 other sources I could. The Reddit's another good one. And over time, you also realize that people focus in certain areas. And so I have certain friends where I know if I have a question around a particular topic, I'll reach out to that person, so and first, actually, the very first thing I do is I search my own computer, because often I've done stuff and I just totally forgot I even did it. Right. But yeah, I think Tom and I were even saying, I've searched the forums and then found a post and reading it like, oh, that's how you do. Oh, wait a minute. That was me that wrote that. Like I totally forgot I even did it.
Like 2 years ago, you're like, oh, wait, that code looks great.
I don't know if you ever read.
Wow, that code looks like crap. And it's like, oh, yeah, because I wrote it 4 years ago.
You remind me of the little interlude, Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. There's on Mars, the one character has his memory erased several times, and he finds a note that was written by himself, although he doesn't know that. And he says, I really admire the man who wrote this note. He was so brave. And finds out it was himself.
Right.
Like that. I was telling Joe the other day, I was like, when I wrote this code, only God and I knew what it did. Now only God knows.
That's the other one is annotate. Right.
Yeah. Speaking of like websites and stuff, did you want to talk about Scriptline real quick? Just
sure.
Show it off. Sorry.
Why don't you share your screen? Go to it and share your screen.
I didn't know if you had any more questions or anything before I move on.
Oh, nothing that is vital.
Okay. If it comes up, just let us know. Let me share here. Sorry, I got to get to the actual website first. Come on, buddy. There we go. All right, so this is a Scriptline once it pulls up here in a minute.
Oh, side comment, something that I have to do at work. There's the trick of having the interpreter be separate from the script, because I can't load the interpreter. So I have but I am able to get the interpreter as a .exe, and I use the trick of giving it the same name as the script. So I have many versions of the interpreter with the name of various scripts. And that's to get around the problem of not being able to install.
I'm a little confused on what I'd like. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, at work, I cannot install AutoHotkey.
Okay. Fair enough.
And there is a method, which I found in the forums, where you can put the AutoHotkey.exe file, which I was able to get onto the work computer. I think I may have originally put it on with the USB stick. But and if you take that AutoHotkey interpreter and put your script in the same folder as that and give the AutoHotkey interpreter the same name as your script, then when you click on that renamed interpreter, it will open the script.
Okay, but why don't you just drag your script onto the exe file?
Well, that's more mousing. I'd rather do clicking.
Yeah, but you could also, I think, make a shortcut that would automatically do it for you as well, right? Or I think there's ways to programmatically do it without taking that extra step that you're doing. But anyway, yeah, it's still really cool.
I may be missing something you're saying. The way I have it right now seems very simple because I only have to click on the AutoHotkey, the renamed AutoHotkey interpreter, and it will open the script that has the same name. If you have something that seems so simple, I'm not sure what the simpler step would be.
But wouldn't you have to do that for like every script you do?
Right.
Yeah, when I open at the beginning of the day, I would open each one, or I could do as Joe suggested and have a master script that opens all the others.
Yeah, I would go that way. I've done that before. Just a bunch of runs or whatever you want to do.
It's a workaround.
Like, don't be afraid to talk to your IT team. When I was working, I ran into tons of issues where our whatever programs we had running, antivirus or just whatever protection programs, it would block AutoHotkeys a lot of times because it didn't know what it was. And I eventually just went to IT. I emailed them, got some of the managers involved and just like really talked to them and like, look, here's what AutoHotkeys is. Here's what I'm using it for. and they can actually like go in, and there's a lot of stuff they can do. They can make it so that AutoHotkeys only works on your computer or works out of a certain folder. So you have like a folder on your desktop called AutoHotkey scripts. They can make it that anything you run in that folder will just work. And honestly, I mean, in the long run, that's going to help you a lot if you can get a hold of them and just, convince them to unlock, the functionality of AutoHotkeys through whatever program they're using, whether it's like a lot of them are traps, they're called, is one of the more popular ones that companies use. So, I mean, I would try to at least give a conversation going about it. It's going to help everybody, years from now too.
Fair enough.
That's the difficult route.
Well,
I mean, at the beginning, yeah, but it's just an email really to get the conversation going. And hopefully they're not going to like argue too much against it.
I would not count on that.
So I worked at Brinks for a while, which is the financial with the big trucks, hauling money. And they insisted everybody had really crazy passwords and all this security. And it took a long time for them to let me have AutoHotkey on my computer, right? Honestly, it was a battle. My boss I told her, I'm like, I can't do my job if I don't have this. I'm like, it's the way it is. I don't know if I'm going to try to say this or not. His chat on my YouTube channel, Menschelgliabiner, sorry, it's my best I can do, was saying, hey, you could create just a batch file, right? That would, that you'd launch the batch file and it would automatically drive that script to the executable. The thing is, you end up having all these copies of the executable, right? And,
yes.
And especially what happens when you want to update AutoHotkey. Now you got to go back and update every one of those scripts, right?
The AutoHotkey seems not to come up with new additions often, or else I'm just using.
It comes up with a lot.
Okay, then I'm using a very old.
They're minor tweaks. Don't get me wrong; they're minor tweaks, but it's updated pretty frequently.
Okay, well, I'm not been doing that.
I mean, that's not. I don't update that often either.
I do, but anyway, I agree. They're minor tweaks, right? They're usually stuff that I don't even notice, but I'm like, what? Why not? Why not have the most current one? But anyway, yeah, I think. And now here's what I did want to take a step back and say kudos to you for actually realizing that, hey, even if you don't have admin privileges, and you can't install programs, if you can put the exe on your computer, right, you can still use AutoHotkey. It's one of the things that drives me nuts. Well, and I actually made a video about this because my wife, she had some stuff in Excel and she wanted, I forget what it was. She just wanted this automation of renaming, whatever, I forget what it was. And I'm like, well, let's put AutoHotkey. She's like, I can't, put AutoHotkey on my computer. We couldn't even transfer it with the USB drive, right? And I'm like, oh God, okay, well, I could write this in a VBA macro. And I'm thinking, and then finally, and I think she said it, right? And I'm like, I'm such a freaking idiot. She's like, well, can I just email you the Excel file? And I'm like, well, duh, yeah, just send me the Excel file. I'll do it on my computer and I send you the file back all processed, right? But it was one of those, like, I was in my thought of like, how am I going to run this on her computer? Like, I don't have to. But Tom, I've run into it at some companies. They're real a-holes, and then other ones aren't,
Yeah, every big company, it's worth sending an email, hey, if it looks like it is going to be a battle, then yeah, make your decision there. But, just a quick email, see what happens and go for it. Also, another thing you might want to try is using the portable version of AutoHotkeys, because that doesn't really actually, a lot of times I can get around a lot of that kind of like admin stuff. That's what I had to use, was the portable version of AutoHotkeys. So you can just Google that and it should be like the first result.
So normally, Tom, I would agree with you in the sense of I'm a big ask for forgiveness instead of permission. However, and so when you were saying just send an email, just that in the larger companies, because the problem is the second you do an email and it's out there, it suddenly can be a red flag, right? So on this one time for me, I would just go have a conversation with someone instead of putting it in an email, just to see if you can find someone you can talk to and get the feeling of how much they freak out, before you go down because right now you have a working solution, right? It's not great, but it works. And the last thing you want is someone to say, holy crap, you're able to do that? Well, screw that. You shouldn't be able to do that, and lock it entirely down, right? That's my 2 cents. I've just worked at a lot of really big a-hole companies.
Yeah.
And it's not really the company, right? It's the different IT groups that are just, some of them are crazy and some of them, aren't.
No,
Best thing is not to be noticed.
Right.
But of course, at the same time, be careful because they can monitor everything you're doing.
Sure. Right.
So, but yeah, you know what you got to do better than we would. But yeah. So this is ScriptMime. It's a website that recently popped up. Maybe 2 months ago, I think, is when it kind of was really announced, I guess. But it's a great place to share some scripts. Going onto the forums, you can find scripts, but AutoHotkeys, there's so many pages, so many things there. Reddit stuff tends to get buried after a while, so it can be a little bit harder to Google. AutoHotkey forums isn't too bad to Google for. You can usually find what you want. But this is just literally scripts, so this is the home page. But the main part you're going to care about, all the people watching, is going to be the Explore thing here. And it's literally just people sharing their scripts. They can do cool stuff like this where they can put GIFs in there so you can actually see it live in action without the person having to record like a whole video or something. I thought I would just share that real quick. I've been doing some showcase videos where, I've been highlighting some of these people's. Here's mine actually right here, the Reddit post scoring system. For some reason, my GIF didn't work, but whatever. Yeah, I just want to throw it out there. This is a great place to find scripts if you don't have anything specific. You just want to see
mime. Okay.
What's cool out there. There's times where I found one on here recently that I didn't even know you could do. And I use for my videos this one, hide desktop icons with key press. I never thought to do that. So it was kind of a cool way to be like, oh, that's cool. So I use this on my videos a lot of time just to hide my desktop icons when I'm recording real quick.
Something that not directly related to this, but would be very useful, and I have trouble with getting data out of PDF files. And it may be that there's no good answer for that, but particularly tables. One method would be like a regedit type method, but then you have to do a lot of work to make that come out correctly, and which is perhaps the best answer. But I have there's a machine that prints out PDF files with data, and there's some variability in how long each section is, but there's a table that I would like to get into things that I'm making, and it is actually 2 different tables, and I've tried different tricks like copy and paste, and on one of the tables copying into TextPad works and the other copying into Excel works, but not for both. Anyway, it's PDF files, I guess, are very difficult.
It really depends. The first thing you got to do is make sure, which it sounds like it is, that it is doing like kind of like some type of OCR where it's, recognizing that there is text there.
I don't think it's doing I'm not doing character recognition.
No,
so
but
they are. Yeah, go ahead.
No, well, see, certain files, they'll save. Sometimes they save. Like I've downloaded, what other stuff? It was stuff dealing with real estate from like county auctions. On those, there is no actual text. So even if you had the PDF and you open it and you're selecting it, it's an image, right?
Well,
and
this one is better than that. At least it has a ASCII in it.
Yeah, well, and that's where, and sometimes they can programmatically make that where you can't copy that regardless, right? And so, like what I used to do is to use Word to open the PDF. If Word could automatically get the text like you're describing, it would do that. If it couldn't, it would switch and use OCR to grab it and then, grab the text, right? So I think that's where Tom was going, like, it just depends how they're doing it. Now, actually, Tom said that's your first step. My first step is step 0 is to first find out if you can actually go to the actual, source instead of getting an export from the PDF. See if you can get access to the actual database instead of getting it, from a PDF. Maybe you can actually, from an API or something, you can get right to the data you want, right? I mean, this comes up a lot where it's Jackie has a story. He was at work and someone came to him, very similar thing, saying, hey, we have this thing and it's really bad. And, can you do something with this? So he started automating it, but he kept asking someone, well, where does this data come from? And it turns out the data was actually stored digitally at the beginning, and then they would export it, and then someone would do something, and then they would save it as like an image, and then it got, and he just went back one step and got it programmatically at the beginning, and everything was done and perfect, right? So it can happen.
In this particular case, I've looked at the machine that produces it, and it actually has a choice of saving as XML or PDF.
Oh, there you go.
XML would be great. However, there are several of these machines at different physical locations, and I don't have the authority to tell people to do it in a different way. So it's going to be continued to produce as PDF, and then they send it as an attachment. So I cannot change what people are doing.
Okay, so now let's keep going down that path, right? Of, let's say you have a PDF, right? And different programs, well, there's like a PDF to text executable. There's Ghost script, I think it's called Ghost something. I found 3 or 4 that'll convert PDFs. Some of them do, and it just depends on the file, right? Do a better job at keeping that structure, right? Now, if you have money, or someone has, or automatically has the Adobe actual writer, it has a COM object. If you can use that COM object, holy cow, it'll get that table just like you want it, right? It's a much better approach overall. And I've worked with a lot of PDFs trying to deal with this stuff. And Joe Winograd, if you search for him, I think on the AutoHotkey forum too, he's done a lot of stuff with PDFs and talks through different approaches of extracting text from PDFs. But the problem is it's really complicated, and it depends on your PDF and what access you have for different programs.
Oh, side comment, in one of your comments, you sent me to a brief intro to regedit, and I read that, and I thought it was really good. I can't remember the guy's name, but
are you talking about regex? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, regex. Yeah. And there was a guy who you suggested reading his intro book, and I thought that was really nice. It was about 40 pages.
Yeah. I even have his lynda.com course. I think I worked through, but regex is amazingly powerful, and it's fun, but you're right. It can be a beat down as well.
So that guy's intro, and I don't remember his name, but it was like $20 or something for his paper, but it was worth it. Yeah, because I thought he gave a nice intro to regex.
Awesome.
And
I'm looking for the book. Now that I'm so excited, I have my books again. I didn't have them for. So
I didn't have a physical book. I had his PDF, but that was fine. And it was maybe 60 pages. And I thought it was a nice intro to someone who had not used regex before.
Yeah. Is it
He had his picture was on it. He has a beard. I can't remember his name.
Oh, yeah.
He said he had been a publisher of some journal that no longer exists.
Oh, that's that one. Yes. That's he's the other AutoHotkey guy that actually writes stuff. Dan. I'm blanking on his name right now. Anyway, he
you linked to him in your section.
Yeah, his intro to regex stuff. It's a great book. Yeah, I thought it was a really good. I totally read through it. I printed it out and worked through it because I'm just old school kind of that way.
Me too.
Computer file, or no, computer edge. But I've had some calls with him. Computer edge. Yeah, Jack. That's what it is. Jack Dunning.
That's right. Yeah, that was it.
Oh yeah.
It was very good.
I reference his site a lot. It's really good.
Yeah, someday I'll get off my butt, and his books. I don't know how he does it in the sense of he'll be like, hey, let's learn hotkeys. And then he'll give like 40 examples of doing them over and over. And I'm like, oh my word. But he beats it India, which is great. Yeah. I'll put in the chat, the regex book. Especially the difference between regex replace and in the just regex find, where you're searching. And one of them he describes as a train. One of them, the train stops, and the other one, it keeps going and does all of it. And I'm like, thank God, because it got so confusing to me when I was learning them.
So Joe, did you want to touch point on these last two items we got?
Which are what?
The Zoom one, and then real quick, I don't know if
thank you.
The person is I think you have it. The guy who wanted to know how to put a hotkey inside of a hotkey.
Well, that was the GUI.
Oh, that was the GUI one. Okay.
Yes, so we got that one. Let me pull up. Actually, let me. You know what? Because I don't want to. Let me make sure I got my right thing here with the. Thanks for reminding me on the Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's really the last one we got.
Because I have now and Dale
said, make me a script that works in Outlook. You have 3 days. That might have been me testing out the survey.
So Zoom, it's a great tool, right? Except for I just renewed my registration. It's like $150 a year now. I'm like, great. Anyway, it's a pretty amazing tool. But just like my friend Dr. Cook, my friend Dale is a professor, but he's on the East Coast, and both of them are in meetings all the time, and they're in so many meetings that Zoom only keeps like the last 10 meetings in your history. And so he's often, and it's also just a number. So you need to memorize the number with what meeting it goes to, and it's crazy. So I didn't build. Now what I did build just as a demonstration here, and I haven't shared this yet. So I have to, let me see if I can do this on the fly here. Oh, wrong button. That's funny. So apps G, okay, and Zoom launcher. I'm creating a GIST. It should here. So here, I'll put this in the chat. Once I can find the chat, I got 80 windows open.
I've never seen someone put their toolbar on the left side.
The
right side, but never the left side.
Oh, I put. Well, it just really depends on where my other monitors are. I want it like right now I have 2 and then 1 stacked above, and I want it where it's kind of close to all of them. So yeah, I've had it on the side for over 20 years now. Anyway, so what was really interesting about Zoom was launching it like into a meeting was really complicated. I did a lot of research on this. Now this code I gave here, this will jump to this meeting. This is the unique ID for my meeting room. This isn't my password, is not my password, but if you had it, you just put it here. And then the hotkey I have as apps key and Z will launch, Zoom for me. And then it'll wait for Zoom to launch. It'll sleep a little bit and then send the Alt V, which tells it to turn on the video, because for whatever reason now I can't have my video on by default anymore. Maybe they changed it again, but for a while you couldn't do that. Now Dale was saying he wanted a way to where you could basically, he's like, I want to be able to, he didn't say this entirely, but like hit a hotkey, type in the meeting ID, and then have it launch Zoom. Well, I'm reading into it. I don't think it's what he said, but that's where it really comes down to, right? All I would do is change just to be, oops. Something like this, and then up here, well, to simplify it, right, this would be, input box to start, right? Meeting ID. Now I wouldn't do this because now I still have to remember that stupid meeting ID, right? So I would build a GUI that would list the name of like what I remember and have the key and value pair. The name would be the key and the value would be that meeting ID. And so I could select the meeting I want, and then it would dump in that meeting ID into this and load the meeting. And that's where, this, maybe you have a different hotkey, whether you want the video on by default versus not, right?
Yeah,
that's probably what I would do with that.
There's a bunch of hotkeys built into Zoom already.
There's too many.
There's a lot of stuff you can do here too. Yeah.
And you know what really?
Yeah. So you can always
chaps,
use contacts or a GUI.
Yeah, they eat up the Alt key you can't even turn it off, but like just the Alt key, and you can't disable it. It's one of my biggest gripes with Zoom is that they're not flexible. You know, you can at least turn off some of them hotkeys, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Thanks for remembering that, Tom. I totally forgot we didn't cover it.
And I even do that with myself, where I'll have so many hotkeys eventually that I'll create like a GUI, or better yet, I usually like to use a context menu. That way I can remember like the function or the script's name versus having to memorize this. If I want to do this, is it F1 through F12? I can't remember.
Yeah. Circling back, sorry, Otto, you had commented in here and I didn't notice it, but yeah, Excel can also pull in, you know, I don't know about any Office Windows program, but a lot of Windows programs you can import from a PDF. Now, their, I want to say ability or functionality at grabbing an actual table and doing it consistently where you can go find it. What I found was using the thing that actually, you know, ran from the DOS prompt that created a flat text file. Then I used a regular expression to find it. That was my best approach because it just varied. Now, back in maybe in Dan's case, he can look for structured words, you know, of where it's always after this, or it's always on page 4 after this, you know, and simplify that. But if it doesn't give you that structure, man, it can be a real pain to find what you're looking for.
You mentioned opening things in Word. Word seems to handle it better than anything I can do on my own. Is it considered inelegant to have your AutoHotkey program use Word to process stuff for it?
Who cares, right?
Okay.
It works. I did it. A guy that I was helping at the time, I was the Cub Scouts. Anyway, I was involved leading the pack I was a Cub Master, and the regional guy, every week he had to go and do kind of like what you're describing with like 20 reports, and had to manually export them as files and then process each one and import it. And he was manually doing all the stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, let me take a look at this. So on that example, I tried a lot of different solutions, and the best one I found was to use Word to open it, and it converted it really well. It converted it, and then I grabbed it, and then I dumped it into an Excel file from Word, you know, when I isolated the data that I wanted. And that was my approach, because Word did it automatically, you know, grabbed the text really well. So I'm like, you know what? Who cares?
Yeah. Do what you gotta do.
Let me see if
That was pretty much all the topics we had, right? Let's just double check. I'm kind of going through everything here just to make sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, and I think it's a good demo for converting built with the client. Okay. Oh, December 20. I'm looking at my videos here. I don't think that's too recent. A few years ago. I found the video. Okay. So here's the link. I'll put in actually I'll put it, Dan, since you're here in Zoom. It's there, but I'll also put it, I'll find my YouTube video. There it is. Example using Word. And I don't know in there if I actually gave the code, because it was very specific, but you can watch the video and see, you know, how it worked. Saved them a crap load of time. Well, thank you all for being here and participating. And you bet.
And Tom, who I haven't met before, but thank you, Tom.
Right. Yeah. Like we said, we were considering doing this as maybe a weekly thing, you know, or at least somewhat planning on it and then seeing how it goes. But, you know, for those of you that aren't here live watching, you know, if you think this would be cool and helpful, make sure you chime in one of our channels. Yeah,
just throw out a comment. I'm sure we might. I know we got some data on when you guys were really looking at it, but
right.
We'll probably, the survey's still alive, right? If some people want to jump on it, you know, in the next few days.
As an aside, since the email just went out yesterday, there are probably a lot of people who won't notice it until it's over.
Well, we had announced it in a couple places before that.
Oh, okay.
It was just
one I saw.
Yeah. Well,
so.
Yeah. I didn't want to send out a separate email just on it, because we didn't decide we were going to do it until like Monday, I think, or something. I mean, it was Yeah, we were like, oh, hey, let's do that. So yeah, we're still figuring it out and figuring out where we're going to stream it to and how we'll do it. You know, it's this
a good test. Yeah.
This went really well, I think, overall. You know, I wouldn't mind having it also into one of the Facebook groups. That'd be cool. But otherwise, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the survey is still live. I'll throw it in my description just so you guys can, it'll still be, even though the video's, not going to be live anymore, you can still answer the questions. They'll help us out a lot. It's just kind of like, what questions do you have? Which is a lot of what we did today is people who aren't even watching, they're going to watch later. So
yeah. And to the point, very specifically, that tool allows you to upload a file. Granted that you have to change it to a text file. But if you can give us the text, your script, it's so much easier to help you. I understand there's, privilege, privacy stuff. So don't give us stuff that has privacy issues. But if it's something that, is okay sharing, upload it. It makes it so much easier to help people.
Text file, no pictures.
Yeah, no pictures.
That happens a lot where people will send us a picture of their code and I'm like,
oh, mercy.
Send me the raw text. I'm not typing out all this code. So text files, please.
Yeah.
And Joe, you once addressed this question to me by email, but one of my problems is that if I access things through Citrix, it greatly limits AutoHotkey's functions. I can only use those things that are built in, such as tabs or whatever short keys that program writer built there. I can't get control elements and stuff.
Unless, theoretically you could, which I think you started off saying, if you can actually get AutoHotkey running on that remote computer, right, then suddenly, you're back in the ballpark again because those can run local.
There are two levels. Even the work, there's home to work, and then at work, it contacts servers through Citrix as well. Yeah. So even the work computer is going through Citrix to another work.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to deal with that a lot too, with desktops not truly being like an actual what you would expect a desktop to be. It was all everything was remote. It was like a kiosk, is what we call them, kiosks.
Yeah. So let me give you a quick story here. I was actually one of the few times one of my friends have asked me to come into their work and help them. So he's local here in Dallas, so I go in there and we're doing the stuff, and he's showing me. And at no point he said he wanted to do web scraping, right? So I'm like, okay. So I brought a thumb drive with some stuff, but we get there and he didn't tell me this because he didn't know any better. I'm not knocking him, but it was actually a remote computer done through Citrix. He was connecting with an actual, like an app, not even a browser. And then it was reading from a database, which they had access to. And I'm like, dude, I could automate all this stuff you're doing and it'd be painful, but I technically could. However, your team has this database, it has all the stuff. You can use SQL to go get what you want and do what you want. There's no reason for me to be spending, hundreds of hours doing this. And that's my whole step. Always take a step back, see if you have access to the actual database, because that's the way you want to do it if you can.
And that's actually something I'm working on right now for that one guy you had pushed to.
Oh, cool.
He pretty much wants exactly that. Is he wants to cut out the middleman. He wants to go straight to the data.
Cool. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, we both take on paid projects. Crazy enough, sometimes we want to make money. Right now I'm pretty busy, so I was just feeding Tom stuff that I'm just too busy to deal with. But yeah, so if you guys have projects that are bigger than a small thing, then let us know and we can have a private chat to see if we can help you and what ballpark wise, at least pricing it would be.
And we both have websites. I'm tabnationcoding.com and just so I don't
the-Automator, the-Automator.com. Yeah.
So you can definitely contact us in a few ways, at least for me, if you're there. Discord, email, whatever floats your boat.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, and thanks for joining the Zoom, Dan.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
See ya.